Welcome back to You're All Doomed, the Friday the 13th podcast that's so desperate for content we're now pulling ideas out of our ass. I'm head caterer Brian.
I'm unit publicist Greg.
Greg, your unit needs no publicity.
Yes, I know. I'm well aware of my reputation. Now, Brian, before we get started on rejoining Jason Friday the 13th, part 13, you have to tell us the coffee story that you alluded to last episode.
Oh, well, I mean, it's not much of a story. I had one cup of coffee, actually it was an Irish coffee in Ireland when I was in college, and it was fine. I've just never felt the need to drink coffee. I know that's kind of a lame answer, but I don't really need caffeine to exist or wake up. So coffee's never really been something that I reach for in the morning. And so it's like, well, I've gotten this far. Why would I start now?
So for all of those listeners who were hoping for some amazing story about how you drank a cup of coffee that had someone's dick in it or something.
Sorry to disappoint.
Yeah. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, I've chosen not to drink coffee. I don't abstain from caffeine. I do drink caffeine, but it's just not something that I need in the morning.
Well, that takes care of this episode. So join us again next time for more. Oh, wait, no. Let's talk about Jason.
Yeah, let's get back on course. This episode begins in a local bar, which is not too dissimilar from the one that we saw in Friday the 13th, part 2. And what we see is 5 drunk college kids sitting in a corner booth, being your typical drunk college kids. There's 3 guys, 2 girls. It's Brandon, Josh, Chad, Sarah, and Jessica.
I was hoping that we were going to find the location that they shot Roadhouse and call this place the Double Deuce, which describes what happens in the bathroom in an upcoming scene.
These 5 kids are being pretty rambunctious and obnoxious, and someone in the booth next to them actually kind of like stands up and leans over the booth into theirs and tells them to quit being so obnoxious. And Brandon, who's kind of he seems like the kind of down for anything dude, he's probably the most hammered out of all of them, and he attempts to actually climb across the booth to start a fight with this guy who he has no business starting a fight with. But he's held back by Chad, who is kind of your stereotypical brainy jock, and he's the one who realizes that they would be no match for these locals. So things eventually calm down, and Brandon is the one that proposes to the group that they go check out the nearby Camp Crystal Lake site, which has really never gone bad in the past, so it's actually a pretty good idea. They know that the thing is about to get bulldozed, and so they see this as kind of like their last chance to check it out and see what the big deal is with the camp. But the 2 girls, Sarah and Jess, they're the ones that are like, absolutely not. We're not doing this. We're not going to Camp Crystal Lake. There's some back and forth between the group, and Allie, who seems to be Chad's girlfriend, says that she'll go if Chad goes, but he doesn't want to seem like a pussy, so he agrees. And so now it's 3 against 2, and they're going. Right before they leave, Brandon decides that he's going to take a leak. So he's standing at the urinal in the bathroom, and he realizes that next to him is the guy from the booth from earlier who told him to shut the hell up.
Staring intently down at Brandon's crotch.
There's understandably an awkward moment between the 2 of them, and the aggressor from before says, I was going to kick your ass, but once I heard you talking about checking out the old Camp Crystal Lake campgrounds, I figured you got something much worse coming to you.
That's pretty awesome. That's that kind of alludes to the fact that some people in the town think that maybe, Jason is still out there, or they take the local legends very seriously, and sort of like that one lady in the reboot, the creepy old lady who answered the door and oh, he's out there, you better what, people go missing. And so some people believe it, some people don't. But, this guy and his cronies at the bar probably steer clear of the old campsite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they know better, which I like, because even these tough, grizzled dudes know not to even venture out that way. And so they're just like, you know what, kids, if you're going to go out there, be my guest.
I envision the dude who approaches Brandon in the bathroom as being somebody like Billy Zabka or something like that.
That's quite the opposite direction that I went in. I went with Kevin James. Because obviously I don't think that Kevin James is a stereotypical tough guy, but I feel like he could, in the right costume and maybe with the right amount of facial hair, could look like a pretty intimidating dude to someone who maybe didn't know any better.
I agree, except that we have the mall cop who appears later in this screenplay, and so we need him to play that as
That's true. We do have that lengthy, like hour-long scene with the security guard on the Segway in the mall. Huh. Well, we'll revisit that. Okay. We can come up with something else.
I really like that in the outline at this point, you've merely written 2 bullet points. The drunken kids from the bar have arrived at the gated construction site. Jason is not pleased.
Hey, we know exactly what's going to happen here, so why waste time?
I was trying to think of how we would have these kids get killed. I mean, spoiler, that's what's going to happen. Do they split off into like little groups, or does Jason just unload on them all at once? I feel like the kills can't be too widespread or messy for reasons that will become apparent in the coming scenes. And I also thought it'd be fun to like see if we could keep a level of escalation to the kills. So far we've had a construction worker whose head gets bashed against a rock. We've had kind of a semi-off-screen sledgehammer to the face. But I thought it'd be kind of cool to have these kids get bumped off, in increasingly grisly ways.
I agree. And I do think that we can't have them all split up because it just doesn't make sense for these particular characters. Like, let's just pretend that for once these characters are semi-intelligent and they're not all going to go off in their separate directions. But what I do kind of envision is maybe like a quick 1-2, or maybe even a quick 1-2-3 kill where there's just a couple of them left and then they do kind of scatter. So I don't see this as one like swipe of the machete taking out 5 people at once, but it does have to happen pretty quickly because, as we've discussed, and we haven't really talked about Jason yet, and we will, but like Jason's an older dude, these are younger kids, so he doesn't necessarily have the advantages that he used to, so he doesn't have the ability to kind of toy with the kids like he did back in the old days. He's going to have to do this pretty methodically and get it over with as quickly as possible and eliminate any kind of chance that someone's going to get away and alert the authorities or whoever they decide to go to.
So he's like, 50 pounds overweight and riding around on a little scooter. That's what we're envisioning for Jason this time.
Well, we just mentioned we've already got the mall cop on the Segway. We can't have another scooter.
Right. Oh, good point. Yeah, that's too many scooters.
I do love the idea of Jason in a rascal scooter, though, going up and down the aisles of the local grocery store trying to find wheat germ or whatever he's eating these days.
You got to stay regular if you want to stay happy.
One thing to point out is that these kids could not be more ill-equipped to be touring this ramshackle campground or construction site, whatever you want to call it. Chad, who's the jock, is carrying a football with him for some reason. He's also wearing his Letterman jacket, but he's just carrying a football around with him.
He's hoping Tommy Wiseau is going to be there. Or what? I mean,
nice little game of catch is going to break out. And then Jessica is intent on capturing this whole event on social media. So she's live streaming something. She's on, Facebook or Instagram or something, and she's checking in sporadically, posting updates about what's going on. And then, of course, there's got to be a guy carrying a bottle of booze and smoking a joint as they're walking around. So they're checking off all the stereotype that we would expect in a scene like this.
That sounds like something Brandon would be doing. He would try to keep his buzz going from the bar.
Yep. So the five of them are just kind of like wandering around aimlessly. They're kind of along the shore of Crystal Lake, and they hear something and they look up at a nearby cabin and they see kind of like a shadowy figure standing on the front porch, and it's very reminiscent of seeing Mrs. Voorhees in part one. And everyone's freaked out and they're all like, all right, that's it, game's over, time to go, we don't need to get caught snooping around here. But Brandon, the drunk one's like, fuck no, I want to go check this out. So he grabs the football from Chad for some reason and runs up to the cabin. And he gets pretty close to the cabin and he's like standing there and he's like trying to yell insults into the cabin, trying to get the guy to come out. And nobody comes out. And so in a last ditch effort, Brandon just kind of like tosses the football onto the front porch, and there's no one there to catch it, but it just kind of like disappears into the darkness. And Brandon turns around and he's a good like 25, 30 yards from the cabin. And he turns around back to his friends and he's like, see, I told you no one was there. And all of a sudden this football comes flying through the air like 100 miles an hour and takes off Brandon's head.
So Tom Brady is in the cabin?
It just completely decapitates him with the football.
Flag on the play.
So R.I.P. Brandon.
That takes things in a very different direction than I was going to go. Where did Jason learn how to throw a football?
He has a mother. He could have very easily just, tossed a football with his mother growing up.
He's going to get picked in the first round of the draft with an arm like that.
He has bad pocket awareness, though. He'll never make it. So my version of Brandon was played by Pete Davidson. He just seemed like someone that would steal a football and try to intimidate Jason and toss a football at him. And I guess Kanye West would be thrilled to see his head get knocked off. So,
yeah, right. As the four remaining kids stare in horror at Brandon's decapitated head, which has been conveniently replaced by a football, Jason steps out of the shadows of the cabin, and we got our first really good look at him. And he's kind of a mess. He's almost like a wraith at this point. He's as torn up and disheveled as we saw him in part 7, with clothes are in rags and everything, but he's much, much more emaciated. He's clearly an old man at this point. I almost kind of pictured him like Stephen Lang in Don't Breathe, or like when we watched Greenland and they got to Scott Glenn's house. I was shocked at just like how wiry and strong he looked, but just like withered at the same time. And, pale and just almost ghostly.
So the question everybody wants to know is he wearing a hockey mask?
Oh, heavens. You have to have him wearing a hockey mask.
I agree. Yeah.
Right?
I mean, it's...
Yeah, I mean, it could even be like hanging off of his, like barely staying on. He's so, withered at this point. But I can't picture a Jason movie without the hockey mask.
It'd be like how a lot of people at the grocery store would just like wear the mask just kind of like hanging on their chin. That's kind of what Jason's doing.
Yeah, right.
With the hockey mask. He's like,
right.
It's here, but I'm not really using it.
Yeah, I wonder, would Jason wear an N95 during the pandemic? I mean, that's, over his hockey mask.
He has no idea about the pandemic. Every day is a pandemic for him.
Yeah, he's social distancing, aggressively.
Yeah. The four of them see Jason standing there, and there's not really any place for them to go. They've got the lake behind them, and the cabins in front of them, and so they start to run, but Jason has already left the cabin and is approaching them. And Jess and Chad are the two unfortunate ones that decided to head in the exact wrong direction. So rather than going for the extra point, Jason decides to go for 2.
Jessica and Chad have to unfortunately run past the cabin to reach presumed safety. Jason is standing on the porch, which is slightly elevated, and as they're about to pass by, he grabs a piece of rebar that's leaning up against the side of the cabin, drops down in front of them off the porch, and skewers them both at the same time.
And even though Jason is a withered old man, he's still not done yet. So with Jess and Chad shish kebabbed on the rebar, Jason then picks the rebar up and plants it in the ground like he's staking his claim, and leaving Jess and Chad impaled in the rebar horizontally.
I thought maybe he could use like the first down chains to see if he got.
We need to check the measurement.
That answers your question of whether or not he's wearing a hockey mask. He's changed it for a football helmet.
Well, after reviewing the play, the call stands and Chad and Jess are dead. So, Greg, who did you have playing these two unfortunate characters?
I had Chad being kind of like a Michael B. Jordan type, probably because I saw him in, wearing a Letterman jacket a lot on Friday Night Lights or something, but I just kind of pictured him in that role. And I sort of thought of Jessica as like an Anna Kendrick.
I took a similar route with Jess and went with Haley Steinfeld.
Yeah.
Maybe a little too young, but it could work. And then Chad, I had playing against type Timothy Chalamet.
That's who I picked for the remaining kid, Josh.
No.
It's Timothée.
Well, speaking of Josh, who let's just say is being played by Timothée Chalamet, it's now just him and Sarah left. Sarah, meanwhile, is left on the shores of Crystal Lake, completely paralyzed in fear, and she has no idea what to do. And she's literally just standing there as Jason continues to walk toward her. And it seems like it takes a while, but like she's standing there, like she's completely frozen. It's clear that she can't move. And Jason just gets closer and closer and closer, and he gets to the point where he's basically standing face to face with Sarah, and he looks down and he sees the broken booze bottle that Brandon was carrying earlier that he dropped. And Jason picks up the broken booze bottle and just crams it right through Sarah's eye socket.
Eesh.
So for me, Sarah was played by Maud Apatow.
I like that. For some reason, I couldn't get Kristen Bell out of my head, but she's way too old to be playing a person of this age. I mean, not to say that she isn't youthful looking, but so like, let's say, era 2003 of Kristen Bell, but I like Maud Apatow. That's funny. That just leaves poor Josh, who is attempting to scramble past all of this carnage and get to presumed safety. He stumbles on debris and vegetation, and he's not getting too far too fast. It gives Jason a chance to catch up to him. But Josh does manage to make it to an area that is near a bulldozer, and Jason decides this is the perfect time to leave a little message for the construction development. Josh has stumbled one final time, and this allows Jason to grab him by the ankles and swing him into the teeth of the bulldozer blade, impaling him through the face. And we can say au revoir to Timothée Chalamet. This scene ends with Jason disappearing back into the darkness. We have 5 deaths this time: Brandon, Josh, Chad, Sarah, and Jessica.
To find out which round I would draft Jason Voorhees in, tune in next week to the next episode of You're All Doomed.